Lovely, this fellowship of those who meet together in communities such as this. I also add other words, in this case, words from a colleague from years ago who said, let us worship with our eyes and ears and fingertips. Feed your eyes upon the mystery and revelation in the faces around you. Seek to know the wistfulness of the very young and the wistfulness of people who are very old. Life comes with singing and laughter, tears and confiding, with a rising wave too great to be held in the mind, the heart, and body. Let us worship because we need to love.
How good it is and how pleasant for people to dwell together. Hine mato, shevet ha'im gam yachad. Good and pleasant, people in peace together. Hine mato, shevet ha'im gam yachad. Good and pleasant for people to peace together.
Good morning. Have you ever been around a child? What about a pack of them? Have you ever been around a middle schooler or a high schooler? What about a whole group of them? It can be draining and exhausting, but it can also be inspiring and life-giving, because I don't know if you've noticed, but one of the things that always stands out to me is that they bring the whole of themselves to everything they do. Look at our young ones. They're too young and too innocent, and some might say too naive, to have a sense of shame or to have that sense of reservation that maybe we carry. And so they bring the whole of themselves. You see it physically in their bodies. You hear it audibly from their loud voices and their glee. And even in middle school and high school, when those pressures start to sink in, they still bring the whole of themselves. We have a unique opportunity next week to practice bringing the whole of ourselves. For years, this institution has done the March of the Goblins, where we celebrate our youngest among us bringing the whole of themselves as they parade through. And we're going to honor that tradition and do it again this year, but this year we're adding in a layer. We're inviting you, no, we're encouraging you to bring the whole of yourselves and be all you can be, inside and out. Please, put on a costume. Wear some cat ears. If that's too much, put on some orange and black or a cuckoo sweater. But bring the whole of yourselves, because if the space of worship and community together isn't where we can do it, then I don't know where is. I'll see you next week in costume. And in the spirit of community, I invite you to join in one voice as we sing 203, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky.
what the people should say then is amen. What a great sound you made. Thank you ever so much. So last week, we had a lot of music. It lasted a long time. We have a little bit of music. It won't last as long. But I didn't include something important to me because it would have filled up too much time. But you can know and should know that last Sunday, that very day, was my 43rd wedding anniversary. And that's kind of astonishing when I contemplate. That's 2/3 of a life. And it's worth mentioning now because this is the offering. And there's the reason. You see, when I had some moments, I went to social media and talked about it. And one of the things I was saying is that at a certain point in a marriage, if you're fortunate enough, you both forget to buy a card and give a gift. I've forgotten many times, but my point is that you no longer need a card or a gift to know that you're married, that your partner loves you. I said at that point in my social media post that it takes about 30 years to figure out what marriage means. The first 13, and I speak only as a male now, you don't even know how stupid you are. The second 15, you know that you're stupid, but you don't know how to fix it. And at that point, at 30 years, you give up trying to know altogether. Because at that point, everything your partner is about is precious to you. I discovered after 30 years, and certainly now after 43, that the pleasure of an anniversary is not what I get from my spouse, but the opportunity to give to her every day. Love is the pleasure in giving. So now that comes to the offering. I want you to contemplate for a moment not how much you love this church, although I hope you do, or how much you love your spouse if you have one, or your children if you have them. I want you to say, what does your love want to give today? Because the act of loving is the enriching of the world itself. You do know that, right? We are put on this planet to love, as those words I read at the beginning said. So your point here is give in a loving way, which doesn't mean with a smile, but with a consequential act. For you who may not know, we divide our offering evenly between sustaining this church and helping the world. If that helps you, think of what you are about to give to help the church and double it, thank you, so that we can be present as a voice of love in a world that needs it each and every day. And now the choir will encourage you with a phenomenal piece of music that will make you eager and excited and therefore give more, correct? Your offering and theirs will now be most gratefully received.
Sing we have chanted, one of the granted, la 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 la. Sing we have chanted, one of the granted, la 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 la. Not long you've lasted, and all they chased. Now is best pleasure to take our pleasure. La 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 la. la la la
I grew up in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, and I remember a warm summer night. I think it was 1960, which is a very long time ago, when my parents took me at the tender age of 7 to see a summer production of HMS Pinafore out in the open-air theater somewhere near Rock Creek Park. The first act was an absolute bore to a 7-year-old. It was a bore because I had to sit behind a woman with a large hat and couldn't see a thing. But at the second act, Dad changed places, and I could see what was going on. And there was a song there that was so much fun that I remember it even now. Never mind the why and wherefore. Perfectly drivel, doggerel song. The lyrics made no sense even to me at that time, but the tune was great fun, and when it ended, applause broke out and provoked an encore. I remember this at 7 now. And the second time they sang it, they were obviously prepared for it, because if you know the song, there are bells that ring. Ring the merry bells aboard ship. And this time, the bells were different. It was a bell and then a foghorn and other things, and we were all laughing hysterically. It was hilarious. And I went home whistling or humming that tune. Fast forward about, 11 to 12 years, and now I am in college, and I am a serious music student. And I do mean serious, which meant that my books included things on Schenkerian analysis, serialism, set theory, metric modulation, reading books that you've never heard of and you don't want to hear of. Gilbert and Sullivan are beyond passé. When a fellow student whispered almost to me that he had a secret love for Gilbert and Sullivan, it led to ribald mocking from all of us serious music students. We were going to make serious music, and we did. Lots of very serious, very bad music. All of it mercifully forgotten today. But Pinafore plays on and on. Second only to their biggest hit, The Mikado. So when I heard that Opera Grand Rapids was going to mount a production, I instantly thought of a piece that was in my head the same way as that Pinafore piece. It is a madrigal, and you'll hear it in just a moment, so get ready, kids. You're almost on. It may sound simple, but in fact is a very subtle piece of music because it leaves out the things that you don't expect to leave out, like an accompaniment that comes and goes. It is a form of vocal music that emerged in the 16th century in Italy and in France, and it's the first form of popular printed music. The printing press had been around for about a century, and some people were learning how to read music, and so they started printing music for people to sing at home for fun. It's like the Tin Pan Alley of Florence. And all of the lyrics were merry and jovial, but sometimes ironic. Did you hear the words of Sing We Enchanted? It's, let's have fun now, for tomorrow we die. Am I right? The same theme turns up in this madrigal that Gilbert and Sullivan wrote for the Mikado. Let me give you a little background. There are 4 characters you're about to hear. Yum Yum. Yum Yum, raise your hand. There's Yum Yum. And Nanki Poo, who wants to be her husband. There you go. And then there is also Piti Singh. Who's Piti Singh? There she is. And then there's Pishtu. She's standing over there, sitting over there. They're about to get up here. And here's the context. In order for Nanki Poo to marry Yum Yum, he has to agree to be beheaded in 30 days. It's a comedy, what can I say? And they're about to celebrate their wedding day, except that they know that 30 days hence it will be a funeral. And so they're trying very, very hard to feel good about it. But you know what happens when you're trying to feel good? You can see right through it. Ladies and gentlemen, would you give us a touch of the stiff upper lippedness that attaches to this wonderful madrigal? Brightly shine, dawns our wedding day. Come on over, friends.
Brightly dawned our wedding day, joyous are we give thee greeting, with a weather art thou fleeting, with
So, Sullivan is a popular composer using a popular vocal form from 3 centuries earlier. And he's writing essentially a parody of a madrigal because he throws in a lot of fa-la-las, you get ding-dongs, all of which are stereotypical parts of the madrigal. And he knows he's making a parody. In fact, if you know Sullivan at all and you know music at all, most of his music is a parody of something else musical. It's very artful, and yet at the same time, it's very approachable. But we serious musicians, we would have none of that. No, we had to listen to Mahler and study Stravinsky and care about Berio and learn how to pronounce and spell Stockhausen. Do we remember a note of what they wrote? No. But do you remember that tune? Of course you do. We like tunes. It's how we're built. And I think we like tunes because whether we admit it or not, we like to sing. I think song is the very first voice we actually have. Babies cry. What's the difference? It's an outburst of emotion. Long before our grown-up boys, who are now men, made words, they babbled, and they did it for their own pleasure. More than one morning, I could hear them babbling in their crib. They weren't asking for us at all. They were entertaining themselves. My 35-year-old, who was a very earnest man, still lives in my brain as the kid hanging onto the rail of his crib, entertaining himself, saying, "Gigo, gigo." We sing naturally. Song is our first voice for at least 2 reasons. One of which is that it's the first voice we hear because mothers sing to infants. They don't even have to think about it. They just do. It's also true that we sing first before we speak because a song, even without words, conveys a feeling. And before we have thought a thought or uttered a word, we have known hope and fear. Our emotions are the lattice work upon which we weave all those important thoughts, all my sermons, all of your reading, all of everything we do as grown-ups that's all rational and planned and sensible is woven atop a lattice of emotions that we learn to express first through song. That's why I almost never plan the hymn, "Sleep, My Child, and Peace Attending." Why? Because we sing that song and we're suddenly children again and we all start crying. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But we don't want to cry in church. Maybe that's one reason we don't like to sing much in church either. Grown-ups are supposed to be in control of their emotions. It's very unmanly, if not ungrown up, to give in to sadness or to sorrow or to fear. The trouble is, we still have them, but we don't know how to sing them, at least not in public. Children were brought to him, it reads in Matthew, in order that he might lay his hands upon them and bless them. And the disciples spoke sternly to those who brought them. And Jesus said, "No, let the little children come to me. Do not stop them. For it is for such as these that the kingdom of heaven belongs." We've all heard that text at some point, but we don't generally agree with it, do we? After all, children should be seen and not heard. Unless, of course, you read the scripture where it says, "Out of the mouths of babes shall come forth strength." Spirituality and religion are for grown-ups to do in large buildings with momentous words. Or you read the prophet who says, "And a little child shall lead them." As my colleague Christopher pointed out, next week our children will be in here wearing their Halloween costumes. And the dare we're putting in front of you is to get your own costume and bring it. To bring the child you still are, that is still precious, that can still feel in public, and dare to bring it to church. Because that's the child that's going to heaven if you pay attention to your Jesus guy. Emotions are the warp and weft of our lives. Before we know true and false, we know fear and love. We have deep thoughts, important things, but deep down, it's these emotions that get us through the day, that make us try again, that sometimes make us want to give up. How many plays have you seen? Operas where some young man is serenading his love from below. How many of you, and I speak to men of my age and older, wooed your spouse with a song at least once? Every mother has sung to her infant. Like I said, every child knows how to sing Ring Around a Rosie, and you never had to teach them once as parents, did you? They taught each other. And who of you can recite the alphabet without singing the song, at least inwardly? When I was a child, before we had even a radio in the car, my mother would sing songs and we would join in, and that would make the time pass. Who remembers that? But our times have changed. Somewhere in the last 2 decades, recorded music became portable as well as broadcast. Now when we drive, the kids are in the back seat with headphones, listening to something that they like, not singing, and we don't sing to them. What became the gift of love, not a young man strumming his guitar below a balcony, but a customized mixtape of favorite songs, of other people singing. And when did it become normal to stop singing the national anthem before a baseball game? You know, when I was a child, we all stood up, we all sang it, and we all yelled, "Play ball," and we all sat down. Now you go to the ball game, and you listen to someone turning it into a song styling rather than singing your own national. We've outsourced our own patriotism. No, I'm sure it's not the sign of the apocalypse. But I think we have lost something when we stop singing in public. That's one reason I began attending synagogue services 20 years ago. If you go to a conservative synagogue, and for some reform, you sing most of the service. There's no music. You just pick it up as you go. And the tunes are 300, 400, 500, 600 years old. We don't know how old. And you're not supposed to be good at it. It's not a performance. It is how prayer happens in that tradition. It's true also in the Sikh tradition. Have you ever heard the azan in Islam? They sing the call to prayer. Song is worship, whether you're doing it in church or not. When you sing, you are expressing something of value to you. Music hath charms, the saying goes, but that's not right. It has power, especially when we make it ourselves, with our own voices. It has power to carry our emotions outward. It has power to unite us to someone else who's feeling that emotion. It has the power to unite us with those we do not know, but who feel. It has the power to sustain us through a tough time. How many of you on a tough day sang a song to keep going? Don't bother raising your hands. You all did. I can even remember a moment in my childhood when it hurt not to sing. I was in 4th grade and the teacher was preparing the class to sing a song together for our parents. I have to govern myself here. This still affects me. And she said, "Weldon," they used my first name then, and you feel free to use it from time to time, but only with the greatest of respect. She said, "Weldon, I think you should just mouth the words because your voice is changing." It was 4th grade. Even I knew she was lying. She didn't like the sound of my voice. What kind of rejection is it to a child to say, "Please do not sing"? And the parents came and I mouthed the words and wept. We need to sing. It is our voice. Years ago, my wife and I went to a movie, which is so rare that when I say years ago, that is a common description. We saw a movie that I wanted to see called Reds. Anybody see this? Story of the Russian Revolution told through the eyes of Warren Beatty's character. And there's a scene in which the peasants and the soldiers are coming down the streets of Moscow singing the Internationale in four-part harmony. And I looked at my wife and said, I'll join any revolution where peasants can sing in four-part harmony. Or a day much more recent, as I'm walking around the West Lake in Hangzhou, China, a famous lake beautifully appointed with pagodas and pavilions and little bridges that arch up high. It's a Sunday and every person in the province seems to be there, so it's hardly a leisurely trip as I thread myself between the families out for a day. And there in the pavilions are other families, often clans, eating food and chatting up merrily. But every now and then, one of those pavilions would have a little band of musicians in it. Not a professional band. You could tell they were amateurs because they were kind of making it up as they went. You could just tell. And they were playing their Chinese violins and playing their flutes. And whenever a song would start, someone listening to them would get up and start singing. And they'd all listen to the one person singing. Not a professional singer, just a person standing up to sing because the song was so moving. In Dickens' Christmas Carol, he takes Scrooge out to a moor where the miners are in a sod house and an old man sings a song that was older than his great-great-grandfather, and the great-great-grandchildren are hearing it. When was the last time a grandparent gave a gift like that? In Newcastle, England, on one of my first walking trips, I visited a place called the Flour Mill, a contemporary art museum, because there was a sound installation I wanted to hear. A great piece of music that I love very much but cannot perform here was being displayed. And let me explain that. The piece is something called Spem in Alium. It's Latin, so don't worry. And it was written by Thomas Tallis in the late 16th century for Queen Elizabeth. So it's not popular music. What makes it impossible to perform is it requires 40 solo voices, each with their own part. It rarely gets performed. But I've heard it in recording. And a sound artist did something I wanted to hear. What she did was she gathered 40 singers and put a microphone in front of each one of them and recorded them separately, and then created a single presentation. And how did that happen? Well, I walked into the room, and there are 40 speakers on posts, arranged in a giant ellipse. It plays over and over again. And I was expecting to hear the music, which I did, but it started with the sound of footsteps as they came in, chatting amongst themselves. You could hear them flipping the pages, coughing. Let's get started, everyone. Murmur, murmur. And then they'd start the music. And you could weave between the speakers and listen to one voice and then another. And you could hear them make their sibilant sounds and clicks as they went through. It was not perfect, but it was the most vivid experience of collective singing I've ever heard in my life. Tiny sounds that get lost in a recording came forward, and I felt there were 40 people standing in a circle singing just to me. It was transporting because they were human beings. I knew they were human because I could feel their flesh coming through the air. George Eliot, the great writer of the 19th century, wrote a poem that says in part, "Oh, may I join the choir invisible." Her vision of eternity is to be reborn in a celestial choir, to make undying music in the world, breathing as beauteous order that controls with growing sway the growing life of man, for which we struggled, failed, and agonized, that sobbed religiously in yearning song, divinely human, raising worship so to higher reference, more mixed with love. That is life to come, whose music is the gladness of the world. You know what I'm telling you. To sing is to live. The first sound you make, unformed as it is a song that says, I am here. The child and adult unite in song. The heart and the mind unite in song. And it is to live beyond your life, because unless you made the song up, someone else wrote it first. Who wrote that alphabet song? I don't know, but the tune is Mr. Mozart's. And when you sing it, he comes back to life in your mouth. And when you teach it to your grandson or your grandchild, you're teaching them Mozart, and they don't even know it, but it's going on into the future. You are the conduit of life, not just the presence of it. What could be more spiritual, more religious, more meaningful than to sing? Did I say you had to be good at it? No. But that is how we raise worship to a higher reference. So my hope for you, that you will honor my tenure once I'm gone by being a church that sings. Not one that has a choir that sings, as great as you are, but a church community that makes the choir just your leader, not your representative. I have never met a clergy person who didn't want a church that sang. And I've always met clergy that wished their churches sang more. Whatever that song, however it is, the more you sing, the more you worship, the larger your hearts, the greater your faith, if you look for a future that's larger than this one. Sing it into being. I hope that these words of my mouth and these meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my strength and my salvation. How odd that we should now pray silently. But I would ask you both to listen and to pause, and thence perhaps to sing our final hymn with new life. Ancient of days, fount of every blessing, that which is the breath in lung and sky, the wind, and all that moves. Open not just our hearts, but our mouths. For if we cannot voice the praise we have for life itself, life goes unseen as well as unheard. Give us such courage to sing, that it matters not whether we hit just the right note, but that we truly sang what mattered to us. We are not here to perform. We are not here to make a show of anything, but to be present with all of ourselves. And if that song be halting, so be it. And if the words be lost in emotion, let it be thus. If the voice would crack, it doesn't matter. We were built to sing. Sing our sorrow, sing our hope, sing our pride, sing our shame. To gather from the past the words sung to us and sing them into a future that can be the gladness of the world. And so however we arrive today, with whatever burden we might be feeling, whatever pain might be boring into us like the thorn that is made of lead, to sing is to go beyond that to hope. We pause now in reverent silence that our ears may hear better. And in so doing, be ready to sing when the moment arrives. We turn our hearts now to those whose lives were completed in this time at years in the past, to give thanks for their lives with us and the gifts that remain with us. We lift up the names of Ed Namey, Marion Peterson, Shirley LaBelle, Thelma Cobb, Charlotte Jellison, Claire Jaretsky, Fred Zwald, and Len Blanding. God, filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens heights, bring proper rest beneath the winds of your Shekinah to the souls of our beloved who have gone to their eternal rest. May you, who are the source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally. Bind them to you and to we the living, that they may rest in peace, that we may be at peace. And let us all say, Amen. You are now to sing. Hymn number 320. And be led back in peace, says Isaiah. The mountains and the hills shall burst into song. And if they can do it, so can you. Because all the trees are already clapping their hands, rejoicing in your voice, because this day and every day is a day which the Lord has made. How could we rejoice and be glad without singing? Amen.
Goody